This week on the BackTable podcast.
But the first good financial book that you read in your life as a high-income earner is probably worth a couple of $1 million to you. It really is, as you apply those principles over the course of the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. It's literally going to be worth millions of dollars. These are people we care about. Why wouldn't we give them that information? And the beautiful thing about handing them a book is it's me telling them, right? It's not you lecturing them. It's letting them hear from somebody else, and maybe they, if they've heard some of this stuff from you, it's now being cemented in there. It's a little more solid. They realize, oh, it's not just my crazy Uncle Chuck, talking about this stuff.
Sure.
There's somebody else that actually thinks he's right, and I think that can be really helpful. So the gift of financial literacy pays dividends going forward for a long way.
Now a quick word from our sponsor.
RADPAD was developed by physicians for physicians. Clinically proven radiation protection during cine and digital subtraction angiography. Don't bet your career or your health on anything less. Trust RADPAD radiation protection shields for all your fluoro-guided interventions. See radpad.com for more information and contact info@radpad.com for a free radiation evaluation and a no-brainer radiation protection cap. And don't forget to tell them that you heard about it on the BackTable podcast. Now, back to the episode.
Our topic today is financial basics, financial literacy, financial whatever with Dr. Jim Dahle. Jim is also known, maybe better known as the white coat investor. Jim is an actively practicing ER physician and creator of the white coat investor. If you've not heard of it, I'm shocked, frankly. But I'll just say that it's a wealth of financial information for doctors or other high-income earners, including the White Coat Investor. They have the blog, the podcast, video casts, books, I think 4 books, online courses, in-person conferences, forums, basically whatever way you like to get information, financial information, White Coat Investor has it. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here again. And thanks for your kind words.
Did I miss anything as far as like what offerings the White Coat Investor has?
We have kind of a new thing we call the Financially Empowered Women's Group, the FEW. And they have webinars every few months. There's a few thousand people in there now, and it's a nice place for women who prefer to learn from other women. So it's been a cool new online community for the White Coat Investor. We've got our forum and our subreddit and our Facebook group, and now we have this fourth group. So that's been a lot of fun the last couple of years.
Where did it develop, on Facebook or on Reddit?
Well, they do have a small Facebook group associated with it, but it's an email newsletter. It's some of the women staffers here at WCI send out every month, and they have these webinars. I'm not invited to them, but I'm told they're great, and they have breakout groups afterward, and they have chats and over coffee or wine or whatever, I don't know, and it's been really popular and taken off quite a bit. So
that's got to be super satisfying, like that you've built something now that kind of like you have offshoots that are kind of taking on lives of their own that kind of develop maybe with a little bit of your guidance, but maybe just independently of you. Isn't that cool?
Well, it is cool. And the more independent of me, the better, right? Because I'm inherently lazy like most entrepreneurs, right?
Sure.
So
background, I just want to refer people. We have an old episode, 194. We recorded about 2 years ago around MLK weekend. So we're about 2 years close to the date since we last had Jim on the show. So we're going to skip the general introduction. But I will ask Jim, like, if you could, like, can you, for maybe people who haven't heard of the White Coat Investor, like, how do you describe it? Like, what's the elevator pitch for White Coat Investor if you're at a dinner party?
I mean, the elevator pitch is it's a resource to help docs stop doing dumb stuff with their money.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that's what it is. And you're right. We put it in whatever form we can that people want their information in, whether it's a podcast or a blog or emails or books or whatever. It's the same information in every format, but
I guess people just
however
want
you'd like to consume it.
Yeah. People just want it in different ways, right? The people who read the blogs may never like watch or listen to a podcast and vice versa.
It was actually surprising to me when I realized how many people there were like that. You poll the podcast listeners and find out that 60% of them never read the blog.
Yeah, I believe
that sort of a thing.
I completely believe that. All right, so first topic that I have on the list is savings. So just savings, like how to save. And what I wanted to dig into, like last podcast, we kind of talked about how important savings was, how important having a good savings rate was, and kind of the mantra to live like a resident. What I wanted to dig in a little bit today is like just the mechanics. Like if somebody is struggling saving whatever number that they're trying to hit, like, do you have any tips, like on the ground tips for, like, these are just the mechanics of being a good saver, like for people who aren't naturally good savers?
Well, there's a few good tips I have for you. Number one, make sure you're getting paid fairly, right?
Okay.
A surprising number of docs are not making good money. I got an email the other day from a doc who's just starting to practice. Their back's against the wall. His spouse is actually working for free in the practice. And I think they took home $80,000 in the last year. And they're like, they got a practice loan, they got a mortgage, they can't put anything away for retirement right now. They just need to get their income up. They have an income problem. So the first thing I tell people is it's way easier to save a lot of money when you make more money. So don't forget to concentrate on offense too, right? You gotta score some points, put some points on the board, make some money, and then the saving becomes much easier, right? I mean, it's true that you can spend $400,000 or $600,000 a year. There's no doubt that can be done. But it's just way easier to save money when you're making 600 than when you're making 200. It's way easier,
Sure.
even with the additional tax burden. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I would say is get used to spending what you made last month, not this month. Spend the money you made the month before. Then you know how much it's going to be, even if you have a variable income, and you can go, okay, well, I want to put this much towards savings. I want to put this much, toward this and this much toward that, and we're going to spend the rest. You already know how much money there is. Whereas I think people get in trouble when they assume they're going to have a certain amount of money and they go spend like they're going to have that amount, and then they don't have that amount. But if you're always a month ahead, and it might take a few months to get to that point where you're a month ahead, I think that helps a lot. And when you ask all the budgeting experts and the budgeting apps, like You Need a Budget, that's like one of their main principles is spend last month's earnings. And then the thing I think a lot of people that struggle to budget, that struggle to really have some sort of written spending plan, tend to react well to is what's sometimes called, anti-budgeting or basically it's just paying yourself first. So you get your money, you put your 20% or whatever toward retirement, and then you can spend the rest. Spend it all. Have fun. It's great. You already paid yourself. Don't try to save what's left. Try to spend what's left. And I think those are the main things. The other thing you got to realize is if you're a typical doc, you're spending a bunch of money on stuff you don't care about. It's not making you happier, right? It's not making anybody in your family happier. Go find those things and cut them out. You'd be surprised how much fluff like that there is in a typical physician budget. If you actually write down what your money went to the last 3 months or so, you'll look at it and go, wow, 28% of my money is going toward that. I don't even like to do that. And that's easy stuff to pick off, when you're trying to save a little bit more money.
Okay. Good tips. As far as like you mentioned, save 20%, is there like a number, like if you don't know a whole lot about somebody's financial situation, do you try and like give them a number, not to anchor to, but like, hey, this is the ballpark of maybe what you want to save? Like assuming you're a high income earner, like assuming you've taken care of the offensive portion. I just heard you mention 20%. I didn't know if that number came just as an example or...
Yeah, that's my general rule of thumb. That's why I throw it out there so often, is because that's about... maybe it's 18, maybe it's 22, maybe it's 16 perhaps, of what you need to save throughout your career to be able to maintain your same lifestyle in retirement. This is after a full career, right? If you want to retire significantly early, it's got to be more than that. You want to be one of these fire people, financially independent, retire early, and you want to punch out at 48. You got to save more than 20%. 20% isn't going to cut it.
Sure.
But the problem is a lot of people out there think they're doing good when they're saving 4%. 4% is not enough. That is not going to cut it. And that's what a lot of docs find out they're saving when they actually run the numbers for the first time and divide what they put away for retirement last year by their gross income. They're like, oh, I only did 4, or I only did 6%. I thought I was doing good because I maxed out that 401k. And it turns out that's not enough. That's not going to give you the same lifestyle in retirement.
That's a good tip. Yeah, if you're putting away 4%, like even a whole career of medicine, you might find yourself a little wanting at the end of a long, good career.
Yeah. 40% of Americans retire on nothing but Social Security.
There.
So even having a little bit's better than that. But
Sure.
You know what? Just Social Security is not a lifestyle that is very similar to what most doctors are living. I'll tell you that right now.
I believe this. Well, I know this personally. All right. So now I wanted to get into something. If I had a critique about my old episode, it's that I didn't talk enough about investing, like the actual mechanics of investing. So one thing I wanted to bring up again is something that was very important to me. And I just wanted to just check in with you and see how mission critical you think this is about a written investor policy statement. Like, one, will you tell everyone what it is and then tell everyone why you think it is or is not important?
Well, I mean, maybe it's not important. Maybe you just put all your money in Bitcoin and Nvidia and hope for the best, and then when the next cool thing comes along, whether it's meme stocks or ARK funds or, we can go back over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years and pick out whatever the greatest investment that year was.
That's actually what I'll do. I'll just invest in those things.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people do. They're literally bouncing around. They have no guidance whatsoever. But a written investing plan, whether you want to call it an investing policy statement or whatever fancy terms you want for it, just says what you're going to do with your money. That's all it says, right? And there's really 4 pieces to it. And the problem is everyone wants to jump to number 4.
Sure.
Because number 4 is the fun part, the sexy part. They're just like, what should I invest in? Well, that's number 4. Number 1's your goals. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to invest without some sort of a goal that you're investing for, right? And sometimes it's easy. It's like retirement. Well, okay, you want to retire, but let's pin down how much you need for retirement and when you want to have it. This is the classic SMART goal, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, time limited, right? That's what SMART stands for. So you want something like, I want $4.5 million in my retirement accounts on January 1st, 2042. That's a SMART goal, right? That's something you can work toward. That's something you can know if you achieved it. But so many times people don't even bother with any sort of a goal. And you can do a goal for education or a second house or whatever else you're saving for. Have a goal, a good goal. And then you choose, what account am I going to save in for this goal, right? If you're saving for retirement, it's going to be 401ks and IRAs and maybe a taxable brokerage account, et cetera. If you're saving for college, it might be a 529 plan. If you're saving for a house down payment, it's probably going to be in, a high yield savings account or a money market fund, just a regular taxable brokerage account, those sorts of things. So you want to choose accounts. First your goals, then the accounts. And the next thing you choose is a mix of investments appropriate for that goal. That's called an asset allocation in professional financial speak. But it just means the mix of investments. How much in stocks, how much in bonds, how much in real estate. If you're going to have multiple types of bonds or multiple types of stocks, how much in each one? It's just percentages. It all adds up to 100%, but that's your investing plan. And then you choose investments. And choosing the investments is super easy when you've done the first 3 steps. When you haven't done the first 3 steps, it's like this total mystery. People have no idea how to choose investments. And that's when they end up with, half their money in Nvidia and half the money in Bitcoin and hoping for the best, and when that works out great, it works out great. And then other years they lose 90% of their money, it just becomes a real problem because people are just making it up and collecting investments as they go along. The written plan is something you can go back and refer to. And you're like, oh, why did I pick this? Oh, yes, this is why I picked this. And, you can even prescribe like how you're going to behave in a market downturn in your written plan. There's all kinds of stuff you can put into your written plan. And if you find yourself with hard decisions about your investments moving forward, you realize your plan's incomplete and you go back and add some things to your plan. You're like, well, what was I going to do in this sort of a situation? Put that in your plan. So the next time it happens, you know what to do.
Touching on the very first part of the investor policy statement, goals. Like, so if someone's saving for retirement, do you have any advice? Like, I don't want to get too far into it, but as far as like, how do you know how much money you need for retirement? I mean, like, I obviously like more is better, but like you mentioned 4.5 million, but how do you know if you need 2 million, 4 million, 10 million? Can you shed a little light on that?
Sure. The best ballpark figure, the best rule of thumb I know is basically comes from reverse engineering what's called the 4% guideline.
Okay.
And this came from studies they did in the 90s where they basically discovered, because, of market volatility, that you can only take out about 4% or so of your initial portfolio value, adjusted upward with inflation each year, and expect your money to last throughout a 30-year retirement with a very high probability. So what does that mean if you can spend 4% a year? That means you need about 25 times what you spend. That's what you need in order to be financially independent, in order to not have to work for anymore, in order to have an adequately sized retirement nest egg. So if you spend $100,000 a year, you need $2.5 million. If you spend $200,000 a year, you need $5 million. If you spend $300,000 a year, you need $7.5 million. Pretty simple math. That'll get you in the ballpark, right? Now, the academics will argue back and forth on exactly what the best way to withdraw from that money during retirement is. And pretty much nobody thinks you should just take 4% out every year and adjust it upward for
blindly.
inflation. But
Sure.
that'll get you in the ballpark. The truth is, it's a big sum of money. It's the greatest financial task of your life to save up this sort of a nest egg. And you want to let your money do as much of the heavy lifting as possible. And that means starting early so you can let compound interest do its magic.
That's one of the things that, man, I just can't tell you how grateful I was that like I discovered your podcast and basically like financial literacy, like the first year that I came out as an attending or, like I went out in private practice and like I was a super saver. I took all that to heart and just was socking away money. And honestly, I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. I just didn't have a lot of expenses at the time. And that money, I mean, like in the last, like, I guess that was 2016 that I came out. So that was just kind of a favorable time to come out. And so it made a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. stock market went up 25% in 2023 and another 25% in 2024.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever you had in stocks before 2023 is now at least 50% higher.
I know.
Right. So it's been a pretty remarkable last few years for sure. I hope people don't expect that to continue every year.
No, I do. I fully expect it to continue. So the other thing that I want to talk about is you mentioned, so part 3 is like asset allocation. So to dig in a little bit to asset allocation, this is actually a part that I found like pretty challenging. And one of the reasons is like, if you just broke it out into broad strokes, like let's just say equities or stocks versus bonds. And there's different percentages, like different ways you can kind of tilt that balance. How do you know, especially if you're a starting investor, how to pick that balance? How to pick something that, like what questions do you ask yourself to know your own comfort level in the future?
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard. The good news is there's no right answer, right? There might not even be just one right answer for you. So it doesn't matter that much, right? Especially in the beginning. What really matters is how much money you're putting in the accounts. If you want big retirement accounts, put a whole bunch of money in there. That's the most important thing, right? And then you'll sort out the asset allocation as you go. But as a general guideline, the more risk you take on, the higher your expected return in the long run. Now, you don't necessarily get the expected return, but if you have a portfolio that's 80 or 90 or 100% stocks, you should probably expect to make more money over the long run than in a portfolio that's 50 or 60 or 70% stocks, with the rest in bonds or CDs or cash or some sort of safe investment. But how do you get that mix just right? Well, what you're looking to do is to balance your FOMO, your fear of missing out, with your fear of loss. And when those fears are exactly equal, you've got that stock to bond percentage just right. If you're always going, I wish I was, could make more money when the market goes up, you probably need a little more aggressive asset allocation. If you're really sweating it out and laying awake at night when the market goes down, or you're thinking about it all day long, you probably need a less aggressive asset allocation. And I always tell people to err on the side of being a little less aggressive until they go through their first big bear market. And there will be one along in 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? They happen not quite like clockwork, but frequently enough that it won't be that long till you go through one. And you'll get a sense of what your risk tolerance is and whether you're taking on too much risk. If when stocks drop 28% in 2027, and you're like, wow, I'm really laying awake at night. I'm really glad I didn't put more money into stocks. Well, you know that you probably don't want a more aggressive asset allocation. Whereas if you're like, I can't wait to put more money in the market. I get a chance to buy low now. This is great. I've been waiting for this moment. Well, maybe you're the right person to bump up that risk level a little bit. Does that make sense? So I think keep it low key until you go through your first bear market. And then you'll figure it out, right? Because the most important thing is that you don't do the classic investing mistake of buying high and selling low. You do that just once in your 50s and you basically hosed yourself as far as your nest egg. So you got to figure this out early on when you don't have that much money to lose. And if you end up doing that once when you're 32, okay, you can recover from that. You do that when you're 58, you got another problem. So you want to not overestimate your risk tolerance. It's kind of like The Price is Right. You want to get as close as you can to it without going over.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's super solid. Do you ever run into people? I mean, I'm sure you do. I mean, you must talk to people from all walks of life, but like when people are going through like real bear markets and they're like, this is fantastic. I can't wait. Like it's a fire sale. I'm getting so much stuff on sale. Like there are probably people like that, right? I mean, That
Yeah,
it doesn't bother
for
them at all.
sure.
Yeah.
And in fact, lots of people think they're like that. Like, well, I'm just going to wait till the next bear market before I invest anything. I'm going to leave it all in cash. And they learn a few things. One, sometimes it doesn't fall as far as the market is at today,
Mhm.
right? If this bear market in 2027 or whenever, it might not fall to today's levels. It might only fall to 2026 levels, right?
Uh-huh.
And then so you missed out on all that gain. And the other thing that happens is a lot of people sit there and wait on it and wait on it and wait on it and wait on it. And now it's been a decade.
Mhm.
It's been 15 years, and now they're like, well, now do I get in? I don't know what to do, right? Just invest when you have the money. Get used to investing every month. You make money every month. You save something every month, invest it. If you get an inheritance from grandma, invest it. If you happen to sell something, you sell a car or a trailer or a second home or something, invest that money. Don't get used to sitting around on cash that's long-term money, right? If it's long-term money, get it invested and get it going.
Man, that's such solid advice. Just get it going. Like if you have it, if you want to get in the market, get in the market. Don't wait for the perfect time. Right? There's no point in trying to time it.
Time in the market matters more than timing the market. They do these
such a good
studies
one.
where they go back and
Sure.
have these people only invest at like the worst time to invest each year.
Right.
Right. And they really don't end up with that much less money than someone who invested at the best time each year.
Sure.
And so the important thing is just get in there, let your money work as hard as you're working. You're busting your butt, right? I mean, we went over the list of specialties that listen to this podcast,
Mhm.
before we started. They're all working their butts off, right? These are hardworking docs and other folks. And you need your money to work that hard. And if you do, you'll find financial success and do well while doing good.
Yep. I think that's also a good reframe. Like putting your money in the market, that's when you're getting your money to work for you. Like otherwise, like you're working, you're generating the money, but that's the whole point of investing is like you want your money doing all the heavy lifting. And once you get enough, that probably there's at some point where it switches, where your money's working harder or not working harder, but it's more efficient than you are. It's still hanging back a little bit on asset allocation. So aside from the bond equity split or the stocks bond split, it seems when you get into the equities portion, like how do you then choose which equities that you want to invest in? And not specific funds, but like I've read your blog and I've seen the portfolio that you post. There's a small value or small cap value tilt. Like what's your advice about that part of the asset allocation if you split away like equities?
Well, the most important thing is whatever you choose,
Mm-hmm.
and there are literally hundreds of reasonable things you can choose. It needs to be something you can stick with long term because most types of equities, most types of stocks are going to have their day in the sun, right? If you choose to kind of tilt your portfolio a little bit toward tech stocks, they're going to have their day in the sun. It was 2023 and 2024, right? That's when they had their day in the sun.
Sure.
If you decide to tilt your portfolio towards small and value stocks, they may have their day in the sun too, right? 2000 to 2010 was kind of their day in the sun. And REITs, real estate investment trusts, they have their day in the sun too. So whatever you do, pick something reasonable and then stick with it. So when that sunny day comes along, you still own it. What people end up doing is they chase performance. They're like, oh, well, tech stocks did really well the last couple of years. I can put all my money in tech stocks. And then, then real estate does really well for a couple of years and they move their money to real estate. So they're constantly buying high and selling low, and you don't want to be doing that. Just stick to a reasonable plan. Now, how do you determine that plan initially? That's what everybody wants to know. They want me to just tell them what's going to do well over their investing horizon, the next 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Right, you're a white coat investor. How simple is that?
Yeah, I have the same problem everybody else has, but a lot of Wall Street doesn't admit. My crystal ball is cloudy. I don't know. And at least I'll tell you that, right? Whereas all these talking heads on CNBC and these things you read in magazines or on the internet, they're just blowing smoke. They don't know. And if you think you know what's going to happen, I'd suggest an exercise that you keep a journal. Call it your investing journal or whatever. It can be on one piece of paper in your desk. And every time you have a prediction, go and write it down. Be as specific as you can and put a date on it. And then every time you do that, go back and look at the old ones. And within a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, I'll bet you convince yourself that your crystal ball is just as cloudy as mine. And you'll realize I need a plan that doesn't require me to be able to predict the future to be successful. And that plan for most people is to kind of own everything. You can go to Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab or iShares or whatever and buy a total stock market index fund that essentially allows you to own all 4,000 U.S. publicly traded companies. You own the stock in those companies. When they make money, you make money. You are buying a stream of earnings from them. And you'll own the bad ones, yes, but you're going to own all the good ones before anybody even knows they're the good ones. And on average, you're going to get the market return, which is far better than most professional investors do. Most people are not beating the index. So that's a beautiful thing that you can just buy them all, and then you don't have to figure out which ones are going to do the best. Now, you can do that on the international side as well. That You can buy a total international stock market fund. It's got 10,000 different stocks in it from, 80 different countries or something. And so you can just buy them all and get the market return. It's a perfectly reasonable way to invest, and it's actually better than the vast majority of other ways to invest. It's never going to be the best way to invest, but to know the best way to invest in advance requires a functional crystal ball. So, that ought to be your foundation, is just buy them all. And then if you decide, I really believe in tech or a small value tilt or a real estate tilt or something, fine. Tilt your portfolio that way, but start with a foundation of low-cost, broadly diversified index funds, and you are highly unlikely to regret that move.
That's really what I wanted to hear from you. So advice for beginners is exactly what you said. Own everything. And then once you own everything, and maybe you do a little bit more research and you've read 100 blogs and 1,000 podcasts, and if in your heart you believe something just slightly different, don't go crazy, but just do a little tilt, right?
Yeah. It's like the Bitcoin bros, right? Every time I ever write anything about Bitcoin or say anything about Bitcoin on the podcast, they come out of the woodwork and tell me how, this is going to be the newfangled currency of the world and it's what all your money ought to be into. You know what? If you really believe in your heart of hearts that Bitcoin is going to $10 million, you ought to own some Bitcoin, right? And it ought to be enough that it's going to make a difference in your life. But not so much that if you're wrong, you're hosed, right?
Sure.
So I'm like, maybe a single-digit percentage of your portfolio, something like 5%. I get these people that come to me and they're like, well, I got $4,000 in Bitcoin. And I'm like, come on, put a reasonable amount that's actually going to change your life if it goes crazy. So I talk some people into increasing it to 5% of their portfolio, and I talk other people into decreasing it to 5% of their portfolio. But if you really believe in that stuff, go ahead and invest in it.
Okay.
I don't know what it's going to do in the future, but it's okay to put some of your money into stuff like that. Just make sure the rest of the plan is very reasonable. And then you can take a flyer on a few things. Just don't have, 20 different things in your portfolio that you're taking a flyer on at 5% each.
Okay. And what I'd like to link to is one of the posts in your blog that I go back to it all the time. I think it's like 150 portfolios that are better than yours. Yeah, I've always found that very helpful. But to explain it a little bit to the audience, it's just a list of just a lot of different portfolios out there. And I assume if you're putting them all in there, that they're reasonable portfolios. Like, it's just a good place to see what somebody else might be doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. And I think it's increased to 200 now. I left the name the same.
I think so. Yeah,
the point is, there's a lot of reasonable ways to invest.
Yep.
Pick one and stick with it.
Right.
And you'll be rewarded. If you fund it adequately, it's going to get you where you're going.
So I want to talk a little bit about real estate. Not a ton, because I feel like that's a whole other topic. But what's the right way to think about real estate? Is this something that it's as foundational as stocks, bonds, real estate, or take it or leave it? And there's a lot of different levels of entry for real estate.
I love real estate. I think it's a great investment. I think it's a great asset class to invest in. That said, my portfolio is 60% stocks, 20% bonds, and 20% real estate. It's not mostly real estate. The beautiful thing about buying stocks is you are owning the most profitable corporations in the history of the world. It takes you 30 seconds to buy them, and it is the most passive of passive income, right? These shares that I bought 20 years ago, I haven't had to do a thing about in the meantime, right? I still got money sitting in investments that I put in there 20 years ago. Same investment, right? It's super passive. So all these people that are into passive income real estate, you want passive, stick it in a stock index fund, right? It's super passive. But real estate is a great investment, right? It makes money in lots of different ways. It makes money from the income, right? Whoever's living in that or whoever's working in that is paying you rent. So there's some income from it. It appreciates in value. You probably have it leveraged a little bit. There's some debt on it. And as that debt's paid down, that increases the value of your investment. There's some really cool tax breaks associated with real estate. There are a ton of different ways to invest in real estate. Some are more passive than others. The very most passive one is to just buy an index fund that buys all the publicly traded real estate. Something like Vanguard's real estate index fund. I think the ticker symbol for the ETF is VNQ. And you basically can buy all the publicly traded real estate in 30 seconds at your brokerage account. And then you own it. That's very, very passive, very, very easy. On the other end of the spectrum are people that buy empty land, go down and get the necessary permits, build a building, furnish it, and then rent it out and manage it and keep it up for the next 20 or 30 years, exchange it occasionally to another property, and then eventually die with it and leave it to their heirs, right? This is very hands-on, especially at the beginning, and can be very profitable, especially if you become good at it. And the tax breaks associated with that style of real estate investing are very good. They're very real. And then there's all kinds of things in between that become less and less passive and more active. In fact, to this day, I'm convinced that the fastest way out of medicine, if you're just like, this is not for me, but I cannot get out now because I don't have any money, is actually building an empire of a handful of short-term rental properties.
Huh.
The cash-on-cash return for those properties, managed well, can be 20%. And if you can make 20% on your money, you don't need that much money to retire. And so I do still think that's the fastest way out of medicine if you hate it. But I hope there's not very many docs who take that off-ramp.
Sure. And actually, just to plug a partner of yours, is it Dr. Kim, who, like, if you're really interested in that part, like owning short-term rentals, that's kind of his specialization?
Yeah, I used to own a portion of a blog called Passive Income MD, where Peter Kim talks a lot about passive income and real estate and those sorts of things. We've subsequently separated a couple of years ago from each other, but it's still a good resource. I wouldn't say don't go listen to it or learn anything more about it. There are other places to learn about real estate on the internet as well. And in fact, we even have a course all about real estate. We call it the No Hype Real Estate Investing course, because I just felt like every real estate course out there is just full of
a little bit of
hype and, selling you this dream. And I just wanted to give people the facts about real estate. This is how it works, right?
Okay.
And if you actually put in the time and the effort, this can work out very well. It's a very reasonable way to build wealth. Lots of doctors have built wealth primarily with real estate investing. It does work. But I just don't want people falling for the hype and thinking it's some sort of get-rich-quick scheme, because it isn't.
Okay. Good tip. All right, switching gears. Some topic I polled some friends and some regular BackTable listeners, and one of the things that came up a couple of times as a topic was the Mega Backdoor Roth. Can I first just have you tell the audience like what the Mega Backdoor Roth is, and then we'll kind of go from there?
Sure. It's almost hard to explain without talking about a backdoor Roth IRA, a regular backdoor Roth IRA.
Yeah.
This is something you do with your IRA, because since 2010, high earners have been allowed to do Roth conversions again. Before 2010, they couldn't do that. And so the technique people do is they put money into a traditional IRA, even though they can't deduct it. Then they move it the next day to a Roth IRA. And this is because you're not allowed to contribute directly to a Roth IRA as a high earner. So this is like a backdoor way to get a Roth IRA conversion for you and your spouse every year. And that has to do with an IRA. That's the important thing, right? This individual retirement arrangement. The Mega Backdoor Roth IRA, despite its name, has nothing to do with an IRA. This is something you do with your 401k or 403b. And it works similarly. You make after-tax contributions to it, not Roth contributions, not tax-deferred contributions, a third type of contributions called after-tax contributions. And not all 401ks allow you to make those contributions, by the way. So you have to check and see if yours does. But you make this after-tax contribution, and you could put as much as, if you're under 50, you could put as much as $70,000 in there for 2025 as a after-tax employee contribution. And then again, if the plan allows it, the IRS is fine with it, but the plan has to allow it as well. You can take that money the next day and put it in the Roth portion of your account. So it's basically a way that you can make a $70,000 a year Roth contribution. Now that's, of course, money you've already paid tax on as you earned it, but you will never pay tax on it again. And when it comes out of that account, it comes out tax-free. So it grows in this tax-protected way for decades. When it comes out, you pay no taxes on it. If you leave it to your heirs, they can stretch it another 10 years and not pay taxes on it. is just a really good way to invest inside Roth IRAs, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's better for you at this moment than a tax-deferred contribution, but it is a great option for a lot of people to get a little bit more money into retirement, into these retirement accounts that are tax protected and asset protected from your creditors. It can just be a really great move. But your plan has to allow it. It has to allow after-tax contributions and in-plan Roth conversions. And if your 401k allows that, you've got access to the Mega Backdoor Roth IRA.
So the caveat being, if your plan allows it. So say if you're in a situation where you're a 1099 employee and you're picking your 401k plan, is this a common feature? Like, if someone's like hearing this and like, oh, never heard of this, I'm going to ask Mayo Clinic or whatever hospital, Kaiser, if my 401k allows this. Is this a common feature?
It's becoming more and more common.
Oh, okay.
It's becoming more and more common. Now, if you're a 1099 doc, right, you're self-employed. You own the
Right.
company.
Yeah,
You can put any 401k you want in place. And this gets really easy. If you don't have any employees, this is
Yes.
really easy, right? You just go open a solo 401k. And you can open one. You can't just walk in the door and buy the cookie cutter one at Vanguard or Fidelity. Actually, Vanguard doesn't even offer one anymore. At Fidelity or Schwab and get this. But you can go to somebody for a very low cost, maybe $300 or $400 or $500 to set up and $100 or $200 a year to maintain. You can go to somebody that will set up a solo 401k for you with this feature. It's not hard to do. I got a whole list of people on my website that will do this for you. They want to do this for you. This is their business. They
Sure.
do this every day for doctors. So it's not hard to do for a solo 401k at all. Now, talking the Mayo Clinic or Kaiser into setting this up
Sure.
is a whole nother level of hassle, And sometimes they don't want to because there's testing on 401ks, right? Your 401k cannot discriminate in favor of the highly compensated employees. So when you allow this sort of a thing, that who's going to take advantage of it, the highly compensated employees, it sometimes makes the plan fail those tests. And the penalty when you fail those tests is the company has to put more money into all the 401ks of the low-level employees. And lots of companies don't want to do that. And so they won't allow you to do these things. They won't let this thing be in the 401k. They're not going to permit this feature. So can be a downside to the company. And that's why you might not have it in your 401k. Even if your C-suite and your HR people know about it, they may just choose this isn't the right thing to do for our company.
Sure. In fact, I think I can't remember if I heard it on the podcast or read it on the blog, that when you were setting up the 401k for the company of the white coat investor, you guys actually do pay the penalties on it because it doesn't pass the testing for.
Yeah. We fail the testing every year. But here's the way I looked at it. I look at it like this, right? When I look at my business expenses, I have a favorite business expense. And that favorite one is paying my employees, right? That does not bother me to put money in my employees' retirement accounts. And I don't think a lot of people think the same way. They're running businesses.
I suspect
and that's
not.
too bad, really. But that's the way I look at it. But the penalty is not something you pay to the IRS. It's not some sort of tax or anything like that. It's literally you give more money to your employees. So when our employees get hired, we tell them, we fail testing every year. That means you get a bonus, essentially. It's called a penalty, but you essentially get a bonus. And it's going to be a different amount every year, but there'll probably be something every year because, people are making big contributions to the retirement accounts, and it causes us to have a penalty. And that's okay with me. We just kind of treat it as part of their compensation. And they're, the people that work at the white coat investor are pretty financially literate. They're okay with, getting bigger retirement account contributions from the company.
Okay.
Instead of, potentially more salary. But you just have to talk your employees into being willing to do that. And that's not the case in a lot of practices, I know. People want cash on the barrel and they want it now.
Yeah, I think you might have a unique situation in your company if I had to imagine the employee situation. All right, so also switching gears again. So Mega Backdoor Roth, it's in the rear view. If you're a high income earner, do you have any advice for people who have a spouse or a partner or someone who they share finances with to get on the same page? And what I mean by that is one person's becoming financially literate and is kind of on this journey, and the other person's like, no, what are you doing? Why do we want to save anything? We'll live in the moment. I don't live 30 years from now. Do you have any advice for like having those conversations or getting someone on the same page as far as like saving, as far as spending, as far as investing, or what? Like, I'm just curious, like how I mean, that must come up in like people ask for advice on this.
Yeah. The truth is you don't have to be on the same page.
Okay.
You do have to be reading from the same book, though, right?
Okay.
I mean, you can be a little different. You can't be dramatically different, right?
Sure.
If one person's like, no, I want to spend everything we have. And you're like, no, I want to have a 70% savings rate.
Right.
Those are pretty fundamentally different things.
Mm-hmm.
The way to have this conversation is to sit down, maybe with your favorite beverage,
Okay.
and have a conversation about what you want out of life, right? Start there and then work your way backwards to the finances, right? Start with, when do you want to be financially free? When do you want to be financially independent? How much money does that take? What does that look like now in our lives? How much do we need to be saving and investing every year to get there? Okay, well, what are we going to sacrifice in order that you can stop working at 62 in order to do that, right? Because there's a cost to everything. And that's how you get on the same page, is you develop shared values and a shared vision. And then when there's some issue with finances down the road, you go back to that shared vision. This is why we're doing this, because we wanted to do this and this, right? We can change what we want, but if that's really what we want, this is what it takes to get there. And you can have anything you want. If you're the docs who listen to this podcast, right? You list off these specialties. They're very highly paid specialties. These are docs with good incomes, right? $400, $500, $800 million, whatever. They're making good money. There's plenty of money to do anything they want. If they want to fly first class to Denmark and spend 2 weeks there in the nicest hotels, they can afford to do that every year, right? You can have anything you want, but you can't have everything. You can't have everything you want. You can't do that 6 times a year and put your 4 kids into $40,000 a year private school elementary and retire at 42 and buy a NetJet subscription. And, you can't do everything. So you've got to decide what you value. And that's all financial planning and budgeting is making sure your money's going to what you care about. So you have to get together with your partner and get on the same page as far as what you care about, what you value. And naturally, most couples have got one person's a little more of a spender, one person's a little more of a saver. That's a good thing. If you're the spender, help the saver to spend a little friggin' money, right? A lot of us have trouble spending money. And if you're the saver, you got to help rein in the free spirit a little bit and make sure they've got something they can spend when they're 65 too, because they're still going to want to spend when they're 65. And so you balance each other out, a little yin, a little yang, and you'll get there, But if you care enough about each other to sit down and have these conversations about your future, you should be able to figure out a way to muddle through. And it's going to involve compromise like everything else in marriage, but you'll get there.
Well, I like the idea of like not starting with the finances first, because right, like if you start talking about savings rate and 4% rule and 401ks, if someone's not into that or really like doesn't have any basis like to talk about that, that's just, that's a conversation's destined for failure. I wanted to ask a question. So whenever you have, let's say it's a family member or a close friend and they're graduating from medical school or graduating from law school or dentistry or whatever, do you have any advice for them? Or so I want to talk about advice that you give those people, and also like someone who like has no financial literacy, or like where you start them out as far as like, hey, take a look at this book. Just advice for like people on their journey to being high income earners and how to manage their finances.
I think the best thing that can really be done for a lot of these people is to hand them one of my books. Maybe not the Physician's Guide to Asset Protection, right?
Sure.
Hand them the original White Coat Investor book or the White Coat Investor's Financial Boot Camp. If they're still in school or even just out of school, you can give them the White Coat Investor's Guide for Students. And it'll get them financially literate. It'll get them pumped up about, learning more about finances and becoming financially literate and realizing the power of money in their life to create the life they want. And I think a lot of people have been introduced to the white coat community through a book like that. So if they'll read a book, give them a book. The books are cheap. They're not expensive. You could even give them a Kindle one for like $10. It's not a big investment. But the first good financial book that you read in your life as a high income earner is probably worth a couple of $1 million to you, right? It really is, as you apply those principles over the course of the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. It's literally going to be worth millions of dollars. These are people we care about. Why wouldn't we give them that information? It costs you $10 on Kindle, right? It costs nothing. Give them the information. And the beautiful thing about handing them a book is it's me telling them, right? It's not you lecturing them. It's letting them hear from somebody else. And maybe they, if they've heard some of this stuff from you, it's now being cemented in there. It's a little more solid. They realize, oh, it's not just my crazy Uncle Chuck, talking about this stuff.
Sure.
There's somebody else that actually thinks he's right. And I think that can be really helpful. So the gift of financial literacy pays dividends going forward for a long way.
The reason that's top of mind for me, I have a younger cousin who's graduating from law school, and we were kind of sitting around during the holidays and talking about this kind of stuff. And I get enthusiastic. Like sometimes when I start talking about it, like it can be like it just like the bug catches me and I can't be stopped. But then like I could tell like it just was kind of landing with a thud, and I thought, man, what can I give this guy like just to get him started? And there's a lot of good financial books out there, but White Coat Investor, obviously a good start.
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Fair
Right?
statement.
As he starts earning money and starts going, what am I going to do with this? And all of a sudden now there's some questions.
Sure.
Or he hears about something bad happening to somebody. They lost all their money in, some crypto asset or, or they come to him at work and say, what are you going to do about the 401k? And all of a sudden now there's questions. Now the student's ready and your phone will start ringing.
Okay. Because it's just, you just feel like now that I'm a little bit into it and I'm not on the other side, but I just realized what an impact it made with me. And I just, you just want like your loved ones to just get it early because it just makes such a difference. A similar question, but any advice for parents out there who just, you got a 4-year-old and you just want your kid to get it, like about raising kids who are financially literate? And I kind of joke about a 4-year-old, but like when you start introducing like money concepts to kids and like teaching them about like this, the world of finance.
Yeah, you can start earlier than a lot of people think,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to start really basic.
Yeah.
And like anything, repetition matters, right? The more you repeat it, the more they understand, So I'll be driving down down the road with elementary school age children, and I'll point out all the stuff they own, right? You're 529, you own Home Depot, you own McDonald's, you own Wendy's. What do you mean I own it, Dad? How does this work? Well, let's talk about what a stock is, right? And you can talk to them about debt. You're like, would you rather pay interest or earn interest? Well, what's interest? Well, let's talk about interest. Oh, yeah, I definitely want to earn interest. I want someone paying me money. Well, so that allows you to talk about debt and allows you to talk about banks and savings and those sorts of things. My kids have been getting this spoon-fed to them all along. And now I've got one out of the house and I've got a senior in high school, right? Now our discussions are very in-depth, right? We're talking about index funds. We're talking about retirement accounts. We're talking about careers and contracts and real estate. And we talk about all kinds of stuff by the time they get to that age, and they're interested in it and they're good with it. And my kids are good with money because we talked about it all along. In some ways, they're better at it than me. In some ways, they don't have these crutches they had from those years when I was donating plasma for grocery money, back in college. They don't have to suffer through that kind of stuff. And so they actually have a healthier attitude about money and about spending in some ways than I do sometimes. So you really can start early and, just recognize that there's a big difference between a 4-year-old and an 11-year-old and an 18-year-old, and you got to make it age appropriate.
Okay, fair statement. I've never attended one of the White Coat Investor conferences, but I know it's a combination. There's the financial component and there's the burnout component. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot like you're the burnout expert, but I just kind of like wanted to get like, since you've been going to your own conferences and listening to people who are probably thought leaders in burnout, what's kind of the 80-20 on burnout? Like, what have you learned about it that surprised you? Or if you had to tell someone a little bit about burnout, what's like the thing that you start with?
I mean, one of the biggest surprises is how big of a problem it is. The first conference I put on was in 2018. And we're like, well, how can we make sure people come to the conference? And what we decided was, well, if they can use their CME money to pay for it, they'll be more likely to come. Well, we can't get CME money to talk about index funds and asset protection. That's not going to work out. And so I literally tried to get every talk at that first conference to qualify for CME, right? So my talk was on like Medicare and stuff. And there's all this stuff that would qualify. And what we realized over the years is I thought this was just a gimmick so people could use their CME money so they could write off the trip, et cetera. And then I realized this is really important to people. And I'm watching the burnout numbers go up every year in the surveys. This is really important to you. And after a while, it was like 50% or more of the people coming are coming for the wellness content to be taught how to not be burned out. And there's obviously some overlap there, right?
Sure.
I mean, the beautiful thing about learning about personal finance, having a written financial plan, doing financial planning at all, is it gives you all these tools you can use to beat burnout. You mentioned at the beginning that I'm now a part-time emergency doc, which is true. I work 6 shifts a month. I only work day shifts, which is very rare for an emergency doc, right? I'm
Sure.
essentially paying my partners to work my share of the nights because I have the money to do so.
Right.
Right. And it's money that allows you to do these things that reduce your burnout, to quit working night shifts, to take less call, to see fewer patients per hour, to not take care of a condition you don't enjoy taking care of, right? Whatever, to not stay in a toxic job. All these things, money allows you, and having control of your money in your financial life allows you to implement those things. So that's part of the 80-20 for sure, is just making sure you got the finances right too. Now, not everybody's going to be financially independent a few years out of residency, but the more financially stable you are, the more you can concentrate on what really matters in life. But the other stuff taught at the conference is amazing stuff. People learn how to think about life and how to make little adjustments at work and how to make little adjustments at home that do make a big difference. And all of a sudden they're much happier. They love their job much more, or they've talked their employer into doing what was done by somebody else they met at the conference, which made all the difference. And now all the docs are happy and they totally revamped how they do call or whatever,
Yeah.
And there's a lot more to burnout than just getting your finances aligned. But the fun part about the conference is our goal is for everyone to go home less burned out than they came. Right. And so we record everything. We make sure the content goes home with people from the conference. It gets packaged up into an online course that they'll have forever. And then we tell them, enjoy your time at the conference. I don't care if you go out to the pool and watch some of the sessions online. We give them access to that. Or don't. Just go to the pool. Go to the pool for 4 days at our conference, and you can catch all the material when you go home. I don't care. Go golfing. But we knock it off at 4 o'clock every day and go have fun. And we put planned activities in there. We go play pickleball together. We go, hit golf balls together. There's a wine tasting one night. We have this event for the financially empowered women. They have their own event at the conference. And, we have dinner groups and that sort of stuff. So from 4 o'clock until whenever you go to bed at 10 or whatever, there's all this fun stuff to do. So you come home more well than you were, and you have a conference where you talk to people of other specialties. So often, I've been to lots of medical conferences with emergency docs,
Right.
not with OBs and, interventional radiologists and whatever else, right? It's pretty cool to go to a conference with all these people you haven't talked to, somebody like them since medical school, really. And most of us, you mentioned talking to your family members, but this is someone we can talk to about money, right? Most of us don't have anybody we can talk frankly about money to in our lives. And you'll sit down at lunch with somebody and 2 minutes later, you'll be discussing net worths and asset allocations and disability insurance and all this cool stuff you can nerd out on.
That's right.
But there's also people that just walk in or like, I don't know anything about money. I just came here to really get started. And so it's a pretty cool combination of people that come to the conference. It's almost entirely docs, right? A small percentage are dentists. The vast majority are physicians. It's a lot of fun. It's a great conference. This is my favorite medical conference every year. I'm obviously biased, but it's really a great conference. You learn a lot and have a lot of fun.
Sure. It is location. I feel like it's always in winter and always somewhere warm.
That's the concept. We're trying to get people to come, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not going to schedule it February in Madison, I mean, come on.
Fair.
I guess we could do Fur Rendezvous in Anchorage one year, but it's just not going to work. So last year we were in Florida. This year we're in San Antonio. We'll announce in about a month where the next year is going to be, but I assure you it's going to be sunny and warm.
Okay.
And it's great. It was great to try out the East Coast, and this time we're gonna try out somewhere between the coasts. We're gonna be just outside San Antonio in the Hill Country at a really nice resort again.
Okay, very nice. So, last question. You must talk to doctors at all different points in their career, coming from all different levels of success or whatever. Are there any like big mistakes that stand out to you, like doctors that the big faux pas that have made like big differences in their like financial trajectory? Is there anything like jumps off the page to you?
Yeah, let me share a statistic.
Okay.
And you may have heard this before, kind of being in the white coat investor community. But when you survey doctors, when you ask them, what's your net worth, right? That's everything you own minus everything you owe. No surprise, the docs in their 30s don't have much net worth, right? Often a negative net worth. They're still paying off student loans. But when you ask docs in their 60s, docs that have been doing this for 20, 25, 30 years, you would expect that to be a substantial net worth, right? But what you find out is that about 25% of doctors in their 60s are not millionaires. And about 11 to 12% have a net worth of under $500,000. What that tells me is that, yeah, there's lots of financially successful doctors out there, but there is this segment that is not getting it. And the bad things happen to people, right? A few of these people, they had 3 divorces and their income and their assets got cut in half multiple times and they got disabled and for whatever reason weren't able to buy disability insurance. Bad things happen to people. Bad things don't happen to 25% of doctors, right? That is not why they're not building any sort of significant wealth. They're making bad decisions. And most of the time it's because they just did what was automatic. And what's automatic is you come out of residency and you've got a big fat mortgage and you've got 2 Teslas you bought on credit. And then 6 months later, you got to start making student loan payments. And all of a sudden you lift your head up at 57 and realize, I haven't really saved anything for retirement yet. We've been spending everything. And now it's really hard to cut back your lifestyle enough to catch up. It's not just saving the normal amount. Now you got to save way more than the normal amount to catch up. So pay some attention to this from the beginning of your career. Whenever you first start becoming financially literate, it's obviously never too late, but the earlier the better. You let your money work just as hard as you do. It's really not that hard to save up this multi-million-dollar nest egg you need if you start relatively early.
I think that's another important point. And if I could reference like our old podcast 194, when we probably talked about it for 10 minutes, but live like a resident. Right when you get out, just keep living like a resident. It's the easiest way to go. And it's super, super solid advice that I think serves a lot of people well.
Yeah, and I think you got to point out, because a lot of people don't get this. They just hear that saying, they're thinking you got to live like a resident your whole career. That's not the idea behind live like a resident. It's to do it for 2, 3, 4 years, something like that.
Sure.
And then you're jump-starting your financial life. And then, yes, you can grow into, 80% of your income and have a very nice financial life going forward from there.
All right. So last question. What's next for the white coat investor? Like, have you accomplished everything you want to accomplish? Like, what's next?
Every year, something like 30,000 medical students come out of school. So there is a whole new crop of people that need this message all the time. So this is what I tell the staff all the time when we come to, meetings or we're doing a year-end evaluation of how the business is doing. I'm like, if we can just tread water and just keep doing what we've been doing, that's a huge success because there's all these people that need it every new year. But we've always got lots of new things coming out. If I talk to everybody in the business, like our person that's in charge of products is working on a retirement course. We have this course that helps people write their initial financial plan. We have a real estate course. But what we don't have is something that's all ready for somebody that's 60 and wondering if now is the time to pull the plug. So we're trying to put together something like that for them. I keep thinking about writing a book for residents, aimed right at residents. And I think the goal is to keep it really short so the residents will actually get through it. So that's sitting out there as an idea of something that we want to work on. And obviously, we got the conference coming up at the end of February. And so that's a big deal for us each year. But mostly it's just to stay mission focused, right? I mean, obviously, it's a for-profit business. It makes money. It has to make money. We got to make payroll every month. But, we become more and more mission focused every year because Katie and I don't need the money. Right. So we can put the money toward these cool things like this huge book giveaway we do every year for as many first-year medical and dental students as we can get the book to. We're pretty darn focused on that mission.
You want to talk a little bit more about the book giveaway? Because we mentioned it
Sure.
last time, but I just want to make sure, because we do have a fair number of medical students who are listening.
Yeah. So this is basically, we call it our champions program. The champion is someone in a first-year medical or dental school class that's willing to pass out the books if we mail them to them. That's the whole program. That's it. You volunteer, you give me your mailing address, we send you a couple of boxes of books, one for everybody in your class. You pass them out. You're the champion. That's it. That's the whole program. It's a book sells for $30, so it's not insignificant. I think last year we gave away $437,000 worth of books. Just trying to get one of these into the hands of every medical student, because what's that $30 worth to them over the course of their career? A couple $1 million, right? How much value did we provide if these students will actually read this book? We're providing literally billions of dollars worth of value to them. So that's what the Champions program is. You can sign up at whitecoatinvestor.com/champion. I think this year's program runs through like March. We just need time to print the books and get them distributed before your school year ends.
Nice. All right, Jim, I think that covers it. Great podcast. One, Jim, I just got to say thank you for coming back on the show. I'm obviously a White Coat Investor fan, and so it's a big deal for me to be able to interview you. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow, rate the show 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, direct message us at _BackTable on Instagram, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, or Blue Sky. BackTable is produced and hosted by myself, Aaron Fritz, and co-hosts
Chris Beck,
Sabine Don, Michael Barraza,
and Ali Behetti.
Our production team is led by Kieran Gannon,
Aaron Bowles,
Gabe Degrezio,
and Josh Spencer.
Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz.
Social media and PR by Ann Dang, Manisha Naganathanahali,
and Manbir Singh Sandhu.
Administrative support provided by Judy Dela Cruz.
Thanks again. See you next time.